Corn snakes are one of the best pet snakes I could ever recommend for a beginner. They're very easy to find, easy to take care of. They don't get massive. I recommend them over other snakes like ball pythons, hognose, sand boas, anacondas. They are just amazing snakes for beginners. But no, they don't eat corn. Hi folks, Adam with Uncharted Wild here. Thanks for tuning in. Before we get into the actual care video though, just a few warnings. First up, we're not going to talk about breeding in this care video. I don't breed any of my reptiles, so I don't know anything about it, so I would not be the right person to tell you about that. So we're not going to talk about like incubation temperatures or when and how to brumate your reptile before breeding season. We're just not going to get into that. I mean, breeding is completely out of my depth because I've never done it. So I mean, that would be like, I don't know, Squidward giving motivational speeches.
I hate all of you.
Another thing is do your research. I mean, don't just take my word 1,000,000%. Like maybe another care sheet out there explains something better, or maybe something that they did was easier than the way I do it. You want to learn as much as you can about this animal before you bring it home from multiple sources. Build a better, kind of more well-rounded image of what you're going to be dealing with this animal before you bring it home. And I talk more about how to prepare for a new pet reptile in this video here. I mean, if there's a care sheet out there that says you can keep 10 corn snakes together in a giant enclosure and just feed them by throwing in a bunch of live mice at feeding time, then, I mean, yeah, don't trust that one probably. Use your judgment. This is Creamsicle, my education corn snake that I use in my programs. Corn snakes will get about 4 to 5 feet at the largest. They're not a super huge snake, and they'll get maybe a pound and a half as an adult. Now, Creamsicle is an albino, you can tell because of those bright red eyes. And albino corn snakes are really cool because they get these really awesome vivid colors. I mean, most albino snakes are either white or white and yellow, kind of like Butters, who I talked about in this video here. But albino corn snakes get these really awesome poppin' colors, and a lot of albino corn snake morphs are still fairly cheap. You can get a plain old corn snake for like 20 to 50 bucks depending on where you go. And I mean, for corn snakes, a lot of their morphs, again, depending on the seller and the size and age of the corn snake, but you can get a whole bunch of different morph varieties for $100, $150. So I mean, for that price tag and all the different color variations and patterns that you have access to, I mean, that is awesome. Now, someone can fact check me on this, but just about, I think, every single corn snake I've ever seen for sale, even at expos, they've all been captive bred. I don't think I have ever seen a wild caught corn snake for sale. I mean, they've been bred popularly in captivity for like 30, 40 years. So, I mean, if I'm wrong, someone tell me, but I think it's almost impossible to find a wild caught corn snake, which is amazing because you want a captive bred animal that's already used to captivity. So you got a corn snake. But now where do you keep it? That's a joke. You should have everything set up and researched before you bring it home. For housing, there's a few different options, each with their own pros and cons. The most popular is going to be glass aquariums or tanks. Very easy to find at pet stores, come in different sizes, each with lids that you can get clamps for, so they're very secure, easy to clean, easy to attach different heat sources to, whether you're doing under tank heaters or you're doing heat lamps on top. Now for a baby, you're gonna want something like a 10-gallon tank, and then for an adult, you're gonna want something with a bit more space, like probably 30 to 40 gallons. Another option is PVC. This is actually what I keep just about all my snakes in. Now, PVC is awesome. It's easy to clean. It's super lightweight, easy to move around. Now, it is pricey. I mean, you can try and build it yourself if you have access to PVC at hardware stores and you kind of have the tool know-how. But I mean, for most people, they're not going to be in that situation. So you're looking at probably $120 kind of starting rate for most of your smaller PVC cages, and you work up from there. You can buy them from places like Animal Plastics online. And you also have to watch the humidity levels in there, because for kind of more of your temperate or arid snakes, the humidity can build up if there's not enough airflow in PVC cages. Another option is wood enclosures, which is, again, pricey, and you'll have to either build it or find someone that can build it for you. You'll have to usually worry about sealing the wood, and then it is very sturdy, so it's not quite as fragile as PVC or glass can be, but that means it's usually very heavy. The last option will be plastic enclosures, either standalone bins or like the bins that you put in a rack system. Now these will do fine for babies, but I really don't usually recommend them for adult corn snakes, because if you have a standalone plastic bin, like one the size of this table, they'll usually be locked on the sides. If this middle part is not secure, they will get out of it. Corn snakes and colubrids are escape artists. And for a rack system, I mean, like I said, corn snakes can get 4 to 5 feet long. They're fairly active snakes. They like a lot of space. And I mean, racks will be fine for some species like ball pythons and hognose snakes, but unless you're getting a very big high-end rack system, I just don't think it'll be enough space for an adult corn snake. For bedding, this is kind of where people kind of start branching out more, because there's some really good beddings out there that look really natural. There's some good beddings that are very sterile and easy to clean, like breeders will typically use. There's people that use bioactive substrate, which is like a sand soil mix with living things inside it to help clean it. There's some really good options out there, and then there's some that are very bad and you definitely want to avoid. We'll just start with the bad first, which will be pine and cedar wood chip bedding. Now you'll most likely find this in the small animal aisle, meant for things like hamsters, guinea pigs, stuff like that, but they're finding it's not even really good for those. It's definitely not good for reptiles. It's not good for them to be in, it's not good for them to breathe in, and just avoid it at all costs. If you're looking for something that's cheap and easy to manage, but might not be as pretty as some of the other substrates out there, then you're looking at newspaper or paper towel. Now it's easy to clean and replace if it gets soiled. It might not be the best as far as snakes getting to burrow and hide it and things like that, but I know plenty of breeders that have paper towel and use that for their snakes, no problem. What I use for just about all my colubrids is aspen bedding. It's very easy to clean and replace if it gets dirty. It holds burrows very, very well. It's very good for someone that has as many snakes as I do, but needs something that's pretty easy to manage and clean, but also allows the snakes to exhibit normal behaviors like digging and burrowing and things like that. I've also seen people use EcoEarth, like those kind of bricks of substrate that you put in water and it'll mix into a substrate, but you want to make sure that it's fully dried out, because again, they don't really like high humidity, and when it is fully dried out, it can get very dusty and kind of make a mess, so you want to be mindful of that. You could also use cypress mulch. Cypress mulch, again, holds humidity really well, so you want to make sure it's very dried out, but it's something else that they can dig around in. If you want something more natural looking, you could do a sand soil substrate mix, which is basically you go down to the hardware store, you get a bag of washed play sand. You want to use play sand and not like paver sand or industrial sand. Then you get a bag of organic topsoil. You mix that together. You want to kind of look through it and make sure there's no shards of plastic or bag or anything like that. And then you put that in and you're good to go. I use that with a lot of my reptiles and their bioactive substrates. It holds burrows very well. It's pretty easy to spot clean. As far as temperature requirements go, corn snakes are very non-demanding. They're really not picky. They like a hot spot around 85 degrees. Keep the warm side of the enclosure in the low 80s. Keep the cool side in like the mid to high 70s. They're fine when nighttime drops into the high 60s as long as they can warm up the next day. They're very not picky. Now, these temperature ranges that I'm giving you, these are just kind of ballparks. These are kind of like the sweet spot. I mean, it's not like if your hot spot rises up to 88 degrees, your snake's going to automatically keel over and die. If it gets too warm in one area, they'll just move to another area and cool off. Now, I mean, if your total enclosure raises up into the mid to high 90s, then yes, that's going to be very uncomfortable and they won't like that. So, I mean, just keep an eye out. I use a temperature gun to check all the temps of all the different enclosures that I have. It's very nice because I basically just point and click and go pop, 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 and it just tells me all the different temperatures in there. And it actually tells me the temperatures of the surface that my animals are resting on. Not just like the random air temperatures, like those crappy little ones that you find at the pet store that you stick on the wall that don't even work that well. The temperature guns work much, much better. For humidity, again, corn snakes aren't that picky, so they like it a little bit more temperate. So you're looking at like 30 to 50, 55%. If you're anything over 70, 75% humidity for too long, you're kind of in danger of respiratory infections and scale rot. And again, this is a range. If your humidity is at 55 to 60%, it's not like your snake's automatically going to keel over and die. For heating, again, there's a few options and it kind of depends on what enclosure you have. The most popular is going to be heat lamps because you pick the right wattage bulb, probably something in the mid to kind of lower range. You're never going to need like a 100-watt heat bulb for a corn snake, but it works best with glass tanks with those mesh lids. It also will work well with PVC or wood enclosures that already have kind of a hole cut, a circular hole cut with mesh over it that you can put the lamp on. And you basically just adjust the hot of the hot spot as needed in the enclosure. Now, you don't really need a heat source at night for a corn snake unless your house gets like really cold, like under 65. And that whole like reptiles can't see red light bulb thing, that's a myth. They do pick up on that. If you are going to use a heat source at night, you're going to want to either get like a black bulb or one of the other heat sources we're about to talk about. Another option is an under tank heater. Now these are usually sold. There's an adhesive side that you'll remove the tape and it'll stick onto the side or the underside of your enclosure. And it usually comes with 4 little node things that you'll put at the corners of your tank. And you want to make sure you use those so it'll raise it up a little bit to get some airflow under there. Because if you don't do that, the heat will get trapped. And I know quite a few people that this has happened to. It'll break the tank and it is not a fun time. You can also use these on PVC enclosures. I would be careful though, because again, it could be a fire hazard. You don't really want to use these on plastic containers or wood. And if you ever run these, you always want to run it with a thermostat. You never want to run it straight because it burns way too hot. It needs a thermostat to regulate the temperature. Now, another option will be heat tape. For heat tape, this is what you see in a lot of rack systems. You're going to need someone to either kind of install it for you, or you're going to have to look up how to install it yourself because it's not as simple as just slapping on an under tank heater. Another easy to install option is a radiant heat panel. I use a ton of these and it's very easy. You basically just screw it into the sides or onto the top. They are pricey and they obviously need a thermostat, and it doesn't really work well in glass aquariums or bins, but it's amazing for PVC and wood enclosures. And the last one is a ceramic heat emitter. It's basically like a bulb that emits no light. You just screw it into a heat lamp. And I don't usually recommend them unless you get a very, very low wattage one, because corn snakes just don't need it as hot as these guys can get. As far as lighting goes, corn snakes really, again, aren't that picky. They don't need UV lighting like bearded dragons and iguanas and other diurnal basking lizards do. You can give them something like a plain old LED light that you screw into a fixture. You can do an LED strip. You can use the light from your heat lamp. And what a lot of people do, they don't even give a dedicated light for their enclosure. If you have your windows open, all they need is a day light cycle. They need that to kind of regulate everything. So if you just have a window open and they can tell that, okay, it's light out, and then the sun goes down, okay, it's dark out, that'll be enough for them. Now, Creamsicle is an albino, which means their eyes are a lot more sensitive to light, so I actually don't have a bright light in for Creamsicle. For Decor, go nuts. Give them a whole bunch of different branches and stuff to climb on. I've noticed corn snakes like to climb a lot more than most of my other snakes, including most of my colubrid species, so love having a bunch of branches. Also want to make sure that you give them a bunch of fake plants and leaves and stuff like that for them to hide on or hide under. You also want to make sure that you have a couple different hides all around the enclosure, so that way if they're in a hidey mood, they can still regulate their temperature while feeling secure by going from hide to hide. And by giving them all this stuff, snakes kind of get stressed out by just complete barren wide open space. So you're filling in their enclosure, it's making them feel more secure, and also gives them a lot of stuff to rub on when it comes time to shed, and he's got to get that shed off. A good sized water bowl is fine. They don't need something huge. I mean, you want something that they can maybe get a good bit of their body into, but I've never really, I think I've maybe seen this snake hang out in the water bowl like twice when I was just going into shed, but they don't just hang out in the water bowl like I often see blood pythons or water pythons doing. You also want to make sure that your water bowl isn't so big that it starts negatively affecting the humidity if you have something kind of more closed off like a PVC or a wood enclosure or a plastic bin. I have well water, so I've just been using tap water with my reptiles for years. I mean, if you're really worried about your water quality or something, you can just buy a dechlorinator. Or if you just get a milk jug and you just fill it up and leave it out overnight without the lid, that'll just naturally dechlorinate it, so you can do it that way too. Corn snakes, really, no matter what life stage they're at, you're always going to be dealing with some type of mouse. I mean, for the little hatchlings, you're going to be doing pinkies. For your big 4 or 5 foot adult ones, you can just use large mice. You're never really going to have to worry about rats with these snakes. For feeding, my general rule of thumb is I don't like to feed anything that's much wider than the widest part of them. I mean, that's something that they can comfortably get down. For a little one, you're going to be feeding every 5 to 7 days. For an adult corn snake, once every 2 weeks is fine. So I mean, if you break it down, that's 25 mice a year, give or take a couple weeks, where they might be shedding and not in the mood to eat. To thaw your rodent, all you do is just take it out of the freezer, put in a little cup or bowl or something of warm to hottish water, leave it alone for about an hour, make sure that gives enough time to kind of thaw on the insides and everything. Some people I know actually take all of the feeders that they're going to thaw, they'll put it in a little Ziploc bag. You put that in the water so it thaws there and the rodents don't get all drenched. I actually like the rodents getting all wet, so that way when I go to feed the snake, on top of the food, they're also getting a huge dose of hydration. And do not ever thaw your frozen feeders by putting them in the microwave, because I mean, microwaves heat so unevenly, and if you have like a little fuzzy that might be warm on the outside, but it could be absolutely nuked, lava scalding hot on the inside, and you'll burn the inside of your snake when it eats it. I personally recommend frozen thawed over live feeders for a few reasons. Live feeders are becoming more and more harder to come by. Most of the big chains don't sell them anymore. It's also more expensive. You have to worry about what you're going to do with the mouse if the snake doesn't feel like eating. You also have to worry about the mouse in the enclosure if the snake doesn't eat it. You can't go away for very long. I have quite a few snakes that have scars on them for where the mouse or the rat started chewing on the snake, so you have to look out for that. And it's a big pain. It's really not worth it, especially with corn snakes. I know there are some snake species out there that are very hard to convert over to frozen thawed from live, but I mean, all the years I've been working with corn snakes, I have never once met a corn snake that would not convert over to frozen thawed or had not been eating it right out of the gates from when they were born. And wherever you get your snake from, make sure that you ask them what it last ate, if it's frozen or thawed, when it last ate, when it last shed, all those questions, just to make sure that they know their stuff about that animal, and also that the snake you're getting is healthy and eating. I'll be doing a video more in depth about how to feed your snake and what to look out for and stuff in the future. Now, feeding in the enclosure versus outside of it. I'm not going to get super in depth with this. This really warrants its own video, but there is a group of reptile keepers that think that if you take the snake out and feed it in a separate bin, this will kind of reduce the quote unquote cage aggression and they won't strike at you much in their tank because they know not being fed. This is a myth. Please do not do this. Please do not take them out. It is not proven. Do not feed in a separate enclosure or put them back. It causes a lot of undue stress on the snake. It is not necessary. You risk regurgitation, which is not a fun, pleasant process for the snake. Just please don't do it. Just feed in the enclosure. It'll be fine. Also, don't handle the snake for 2 days after feeding because their digestive system works a lot slower than most animals. So you want to give them enough time to fully get that food down and digested and not risk regurgitating it back up. So this is Kono. Kono belongs to one of my volunteers. I'm actually watching him while she's in college because, surprise, the college does not want little snakes in their dorms. Kono is just like Creamsicle, albino, orangish corn snake. Okay, few things I'm good at, okay? Few things I'm good at. Eating, sleeping, Mario Kart, public speaking. Few things I'm bad at. IDing snake morphs. This is an albino corn snake to me. If someone in the comments wants to tell me what morphs these corn snakes are, I would be very grateful and that would be awesome, but I do not know it. Corn snakes are just super easy, awesome snakes to hold. I mean, like you saw with Creamsicle and now Kono, they just know what to do. They just sit in your hands. They're not really nippy. They don't really musk or anything like that. They're just very usually happy-go-lucky snakes. And I don't even hold Kono that much. In the 7 months that I've had Kono now, I think we've taken him out maybe 2 or 3 times. He's just kind of by nature a really easy snake to hold. Now when you bring a little baby corn snake home, I would probably hold off on trying to hold it because when you bring a little baby snake home, there's 2 main reasons. One, they're small, so they're going to think that just about anything trying to grab them is trying to eat them. So you trying to pick them up, they might be very squiggly, they might try and nip around, bite you or anything like that. They might just try and get away from you, and that's not going to help you guys kind of get used to each other. That is going to stress them out and scare them. Also, little snakes mean little delicate bones. So you trying to hold on to them just to prevent them from falling out of your hands, and even if they do get out of your hands and land hard on the ground, you might risk hurting them. So you want to wait a little bit until they have a couple meals on them. They're starting to put some size and weight on them until you start handling them. Now, Kono obviously is a great size to start handling, but when they're real little, they can be a little tricky. Now, when you do go to start handling your snake for the first time, especially if it's your first ever snake, some people will be nervous and they'll be worried about having their bare hands hold the snake. They might be worried about fingers and stuff, and maybe the snake thinks it's a pinky or something like that, or the heat because they're warm. Just wear gloves, what I tell people. Wear gloves. That way you won't smell like rodents unless you've been going around high-fiving a bunch of rats. And it will also mask your heat signature a good bit. So, I mean, they'll just see glove, they'll just slither on glove. I mean, you could see Kono, obviously he's going around my hands, no problem. But if you're nervous for the first 2 times, just use gloves, wear long sleeves, things like that. So I think that just about sums it up. I mean, like I said, corn snakes are one of the best beginner pet reptiles out there. They're very easy on novices. They're very good for kind of new reptile keepers to get their foot in the door and get used to what it's like taking care of reptiles. Comment down below if you have a corn snake or what reptile you'd like me to see do a care video on next. Like the video if you found it useful, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our future animal videos that I post every week. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you later. Now cream snake.